Cloud Field Day is all about hybrid, multi-cloud, getting your applications anywhere you want, joining those clouds together and making some cohesive whole. This seems like it's going to hurt my head. I really hope that Mike and Barton and Mitch can solve this for me on this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where we bring together a group of IT technical experts to discuss a single idea about a key concept within the IT industry. This podcast features a variety of voices from within the Tech Field Day delegate community. And this episode was recorded just at the conclusion of Cloud Field Day 22. Tech Field Day itself is a part of the Futurum group, and this podcast is also published on our sister company TechStrong.tv. On this episode, as we recover slightly from Cloud Field Day, we're discussing the idea that maybe hybrid multi-cloud applications make my head hurt. Before the discussion, let's meet who's on the panel today. Joining me, a complete panel of first-time Tech Field Day delegates.
Oh my gosh, that's true.
It is. I was really pleased to actually have you guys join us this time.
We didn't know any better.
Can I start? Mike, can you introduce just who are you? What do you do?
Hi, I'm Mike Graff. I'm an infrastructure architect based here in the Bay Area. I work for Dolby Laboratories, and my area focuses on cloud governance and cloud operations.
Hi, I'm Barton George. I've been in the tech industry for, I hate to say it, a little over 30 years. Was at Sun for 13, Dell for 15, and focused on open source Linux developers. Did a line of Linux laptops, and that's sort of where I sit.
I'm Mitch Lewis. I'm actually part of the Futurum group as well. I'm situated within our Signal 65 Labs, which is our performance and testing group. And I cover kind of all things data, AI, and of course, cloud.
One of the things that I've seen is a changing cloud, and one of the things I brought to Cloud Field Day is the idea that hybrid cloud and multi-cloud are kind of central to how enterprises are really using the cloud. It's not that everybody or anybody is all in on one cloud. You find that people think they're all in on one cloud, and then there's this exception. I was working at a university that were all on Azure, apart from this thing that ran over here on AWS, and all these pieces of software as a service that are in other places. And my God, the number of external applications they had connected into their Active Directory that were actually cloud applications, things running all over the world. This really did start to give me a headache. But is that the reality? Is that actually hybrid multi-cloud? And Mike, are you seeing hybrid multi-cloud in the places you work and the places that you talk to?
I mean, I think hybrid cloud, absolutely, right? I think all of us come from an on-premises world, and unless you're starting at a place that's completely born in the cloud, you're going to have some on-premises infrastructure. So I think it is definitely a real thing. Multi-cloud side, I think it's more what you're talking about, which is I have certain applications running in one cloud and certain applications running in another. I don't run into a lot of people who are really doing what the vendors want us to be doing, which is I'm running the same application across all the clouds, right? I think there are some very large companies, very large enterprises that are doing that, but I think in my experience, that's not really how it's happening. It's more like I have this use case that I want to run on AWS, and I have this thing I'm going to run over on Oracle Cloud because it's cheaper over there for certain use cases. I think that's what I've been seeing.
Are you seeing, though, that clearly an Oracle database is more likely to be the thing I'm choosing to run on OCI as the foundation? Do you see that the entire application then runs on the Oracle Cloud? Or are parts of that application running on other clouds and maybe parts of the same application on premises?
I think I see more the latter. Yeah, it's definitely like there are certain things that they're going to be running in one cloud because it's either it has a feature that they want or it's more cost efficient to run it there, but then there might be other pieces or components of that application or microservice that they want to run somewhere else because it's more effective there.
I think a little bit to your point, though, your original point is that often, vendors paint this rosy picture of, you're doing hybrid multi-cloud because it's the best way to do it and it's great. And when in reality, maybe people are doing hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, but it's more out of almost accident or necessity of, well, we did this in Azure because that was just the best place to do it, but this is still, we have to do this on-prem, and this ended up in AWS or whatever. So it's more of a challenge than it is the actual strategy.
I think it's that tension you always have between IT needing standardization to make things rock solid, and you've got people, the developers, who are looking for the best tool for the best job, whether he has one, I've got this one, Mitch has yet another. I think that's what you're seeing in the cloud is people are, and Mike said it, is you're optimizing for, oh, this is great for Azure, so I want that one. And then, or you may not even know the other person put it together because your group is thinking of that. And so it's yeah, Adele, we used to say multi-cloud by default, right? It's not by design. You just sort of happen to be this way.
And I think the not by design element of multi-cloud, I think, is there because although, Mike, there are vendors who will say, yes, we'll run across everything, but every single one of those cloud vendors will say, run everything on us because we're the best place to run everything.
Well, and in an ideal world, that's what you would like to do, right? Because it's hard enough to be an expert on one cloud, right? And so if I'm running in multiple, then I've got to be an expert or have multiples of experts who are focused on each one of those, right? So from a simplicity perspective, you'd much rather be running on one if you can achieve all your, reliability outcomes on that cloud.
Reliability, performance, cost.
Yeah.
What I do see is as organizations get larger, the probability that they'll use actively and proactively choose to use multiple clouds gets higher because the number of use cases. But one of the things that's been a message over the last 10 years alongside cloud is digital transformation. And that digital transformation message tends to be all of your applications need to talk together to one another. And that's where I see large enterprise organizations getting into this headache of I need to integrate, maybe my CRM application is Salesforce, and so I need that to integrate into my Oracle database that's running on OCI, but I'm running all of my authentication through I'm old school, through Entra ID. And now I actually do have that complex multi-cloud, and of course we never completely evacuate on premises because that's where our staff are, and we've got to have some IT close to our staff.
And we still have mainframes.
Absolutely. Maybe we should just go back to mainframes and get away from all this, have a single place, a single standardized place for all of our applications.
Yeah, but I think it's you're right in the sense that the headache comes from the interconnecting the clouds, right? They don't make it easy, they don't make it cheap, right, to do that kind of communication. And so I think that's where a lot of the headaches come in is, okay, I've got application microservice A running over here, and then maybe I've got something over here in another cloud, and then the most kind of efficient, cost-effective way for those two pieces to talk to each other is the headache.
Yeah, and there's some one of the interesting things that came out of Infoblox. The Infoblox team, our first presenter, said that they got together with the DNS specialist from Azure and AWS, and the two of them talk completely different language.
Yep.
They described exactly the same features with completely different words, and yeah, it's weird that we as humans have done that. Although this is a classic thing for AWS. I always said you need to learn to use the words that AWS uses for its things because they don't mean the things you normally do. And I'm terribly sorry, Mitch, I cut you off in that one.
No, it's fine. That's a good point. I think another big piece of this headache as you start spreading out is the security piece too of if you're in more places, that's more vectors of attack, that's more things to monitor and to secure. And I think that was another kind of big theme that we saw throughout pretty much all the presenters. Even the ones that weren't necessarily a security solution or a protection solution, there's certainly an element of monitoring availability or all sorts of those things. What is in my multi-cloud, right?
We saw starting with Infoblox, the story of trying to consolidate to a single tool that will manage across clouds, and getting into Selector of having some intelligence that is applicable or not, artificial intelligence of one form or another, and check out the round table we recorded for some discussion about artificial intelligence. But
more than one.
Yeah, multiple intelligences. Well, I have plenty of intelligences here with me. we saw that story around using more tools to manage more complex environments, and Catchpoint was the continuation of that, recognizing there's all that complexity that a heck of a lot of the stuff is carried over the internet. So that was definitely a big theme for us, was that complexity of gluing all these networks together and operating and taking away the cognitive load for the operations team.
Also, not knowing what you had. I know Haiku talked about data all over the place. I don't remember what the number was, 700? I don't know, some staggering number that they talked to a customer about. Said, hey, came back to them and said, you realize you have data in this many places, and they had no idea. So I think same thing is if you're IT and you're looking at, well, where are my apps running? You would be quite surprised if you went through and inventoried them and had no idea that it was running here or there. I mean, particularly with shadow IT, that's the great thing about the cloud. You just put it on your corporate credit card and you spin it up without anyone having to know.
And going back to security, that becomes a big issue again too with something like ransomware. Okay, you've been attacked, you have data all over, you need to get back up and running. What is where and what is actually important for me to get back up and running when I'm in, 4 clouds and I have, all these things that they're talking about.
And I think I've got a fresh headache for Mike, because what Barton was describing of the shadow IT, right, of somebody in the team, somebody in a business team trying to achieve something, using their credit card to solve that problem in a way that's not being managed, both from my perspective, this is unmanaged infrastructure, but one of the things Mike focuses on is FinOps, is making sure that we're not wasting that money, because the wonderful thing about cloud is you only pay for what you use, and the terrible thing is you pay for everything you use.
So you just described my nightmare situation, which is somebody going out, signing up for a cloud account with a credit card, right? Because then there's no visibility, there's no governance, there's no
Security.
control, security, and none of it, right? So that's definitely my nightmare scenario that I fight against all the time, is understanding what's there. And I think that was, I think at least 3 of the vendors use the term needle in the haystack or needle in a pile of needles, right? That's definitely one of the headaches of a multi-cloud or even a hybrid cloud environment, is just understanding where things are and where the needles are.
And I think it goes back to that stability and reliability tension against agility, right? So some developer says, I don't want to wait for IT to spin up servers for me. I'm just going to go and I'm going to just put on my card and I'll be up, in 5 minutes. And so at a certain point, you're at odds. And the same thing is also there's people who believe that, yes, we should standardize on everything, except for my case, it's a little bit different. And I think I need a separate tool. You guys all use that because that's important to the company, but I need something different. You don't quite get it, do you?
That unique use case where all the rules don't apply to me, but you better follow the rules.
Exactly.
That sounds like executive decisions or possibly the security team.
Well, I think that's in an IT shop, if you're supporting cloud for your company, that's where removing the friction to getting them up and running is how do you kind of avoid that credit card problem, right? Is if you're making it hard for them to get going, versus then they're going to go that way, Barry. But if you're removing the friction to getting into the cloud and deploying in the cloud and making it easier for them, then you can kind of forestall some of that, I feel like.
Because you become more nimble as you get this cloud, you become in control of that as opposed to having them. And so that, it forces you to up your game, and it forces them to start realizing, okay, so there is something, maybe a little bit, I give a little bit of trade-off, but it's pretty good enough for me.
Yeah, and there's some interesting concepts that are really alien in enterprise IT that DevOps practices bring along. As a conventional IT person, if I went to the IT manager and said, we're going to take an expectation that there is going to be, at some random time, we're going to be perfectly happy if there's 30 minutes of outage over the next month. Right? In DevOps, that's called a failure budget. Right? And I can take high-risk actions if I haven't had that much outage in the last month, but if I've already had some outages, I've got to do low risk because that's the level of availability. And it matches kind of the shift we see from on-premises IT where the infrastructure has to be perfect, right? You build your VMware cluster so your VMs never go down, to cloud infrastructure where virtual machines disposable, we'll throw that away. In fact, we love disposable resources.
Containers, poof, ephemeral.
Functions, even less ephemeral, if there is such a thing. But That's bringing more headaches for me, though, because all of these ephemeral things as an operations guy, it's where are the logs for this? How do I know what was going on? What was the state of this application last Tuesday when we had a Sev1 outage for one of our customers because of a misconfiguration somewhere that affected nobody else? How can I identify what was going on at that time?
And that's your problem. I just need to be nimble and go the way I need to go. So why don't you fix that for me?
Mitch, solve this all for me. Please don't tell me I have to run everything on a mainframe and need to relearn Fortran 72.
You know, if I had all the solutions, I'd be a very rich man. But I don't know, and I told you before we started recording this, I was going to work AI back into the conversation, but...
It would be a crime not to.
Right. It's 2025. We have to talk about AI.
We'll get no funding if we don't.
That's right, exactly.
But I mean, I do think there's potentially opportunity there to leverage AI to help with some of these headaches, right? A lot of it is just managing the sprawl and logs or whatever that are really hard to go through manually. If you can automate some of those things, add something intelligent, to take some of this off our plates. I do think that's something that can kind of, act as a Tylenol for a headache.
Yeah, I would like to prevent the headache by having these tools that allow me to do the analysis without tearing what little remains of my hair out. And it was the sort of core premise for Selector AI was to be able to use some old-fashioned machine learning to predict the state in the future and to give you a user interface that's much more friendly by using a large language model. So I think that concept would definitely large language model as a user interface in front of some domain-specific knowledge, be it network logs, be it application logs, hopefully a unified collection of network and application logs so I can get a holistic view and say, why are my queries taking so long? Or better yet, why are people in Spain not ordering this particular towel that I sell? Because, of course, and coming back to it, it's a business question in the end. We're trying to achieve business outcomes with this.
Well, I think that's, if you look at both what FortiGate was doing and what Catchpoint was doing, that's kind of the next evolution of their products, right? Is that they're taking those, I don't know what they call, like FortiGate called them, like they're low-level signals, but they're kind of combining them into something that's adding up to an actionable thing. The next step is being able to ask questions of those signals rather than just having to have them be bubbled up. So I do think that's, and I think Catchpoint is going to be there as well. Is like, why is my application slow, right?
Yeah. Why is somebody in Turkey complaining about my application being slow?
Beyond that too, what should I do about it?
Right.
Because, and they're pretty clear that, they'll get you so far, but they're not necessarily the remediation step. But if you add on, an intelligence layer that can, help you work through that, hopefully you have some people in the room that have a good plan of action, but I think having that extra layer can be helpful. So I think this AI trend of adding, something you can talk to or something intelligent is something that we'll see across, potentially all of the presenters. I think there's probably a way to work it in.
And so we have our future where we simply asking questions of an AI and gaining insights, and we'll get there on our flying cars and all of the other visions of the future. And of course, the future will be completely different. All predictions about the future are pretty dicey.
Although in the Jetsons, they did have flying cars, which we don't have, but they did have that giant Google thing that you could talk to, and it would answer any question that you wanted. So that was something that did come true.
Did it have hallucinations?
No, I'm just talking about just even general Google, but now it's gotten even to a whole nother level, yes, and then we do get into hallucinations. But hey, would you have put your credit card into the internet at the beginning? No, you'd be nuts. But now, how many times a day do we sign up for things and put credit cards in? And so I think we'll have our credit card moment with general AI, or generative, I should say. Well, general generative AI soon.
And will the headaches of multi-cloud go away, or we just change them for new headaches where instead of being concerned about the minutiae of how our application works, we're going to be concerned about the minutiae of how we construct a prompt to ask the right question, because it is all about how you ask the question.
Because what you need is a level of abstraction to orchestrate this. The thing is, who does it behoove to do this, right? So Azure doesn't necessarily want to make sure they work with everyone else. And is there a third party who can do it? And there are people who are trying, but I don't think there's anything yet where you can just push buttons here and there and move apps or workloads as we like to see.
We're definitely still afraid to let the machine take the action for us in this area.
Yeah, I think there's always still more headaches. I mean, you know, you asked me how to solve something. I said, well, you know, eventually maybe AI can help, and immediately we got to hallucinations. There you go. There's another headache right there. So I think there's always something else that, you know, another issue that pops up, and then there's another tool to fix it, and that's one more thing to manage. So it's kind of a never-ending game of whack-a-mole.
Well, thank you for joining me for this conversation. If people who are watching would like to carry on the conversation with you, are there places that we can get in touch with you? Mike, is there a place? Do you hang out on LinkedIn or on one of the social medias?
Yeah,
Can
I
we
mean,
talk to you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to get connected with me. I do have my own blog at cloudyadvice.com if you want to check that out. I write about cloud operations and cloud FinOps and stuff of that nature, but LinkedIn is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, I would say it used to be Twitter, but I've stopped that, and now it's LinkedIn. I'm finding it growing and really interesting. It's great to see a lot of software developers there. That wouldn't have been the case 5 years ago, but that's probably the best place to get me is on LinkedIn. I do post a lot to YouTube, Barton 808, but that's less interactive. You can put comments on the videos, but it's less discussion, whereas you can holler at me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a pretty inactive Twitter account, but then you can also find me. Sometimes I publish stuff on both the Futurum Group website as well as the Signal 65 website.
What about Blue Sky?
Nope.
Yeah.
I started there.
You can find me on Blue Sky too.
Maybe soon.
Cloudy Advice on Blue Sky.
Cloudy Advice for all. And of course, I'm Alastair Cooke. I'm the event lead for Cloud Field Day at Tech Field Day, part of the Futurum Group. And you can find me, well, occasionally you'll find me on the Futurum Group blog as well, because of the site, because like Mitch, I occasionally write for that site. You'll find me also on various places on the Tech Field Day website. But if you want to interact with me directly, LinkedIn works, X, Twitter occasionally, and I think those are probably the best places to catch me. I am experimenting with Blue Sky as well. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. For more episodes, to find all of the amazing episodes that we've recorded and will continue to record, it seems in perpetuity, head across to techfieldday.com/podcast or search for Tech Field Day in your favourite podcast application. You can, of course, also find this and all of the Tech Field Day content across on TechStrong TV as part of the Futurum Group. I'm Alastair Cooke. Tune in for a new episode of the Tech Field Day podcast next week.